It's been a very exciting and interesting year, and one of the things we've started seeing are investors coming back into the helm. Your average person has had a whole lot of equity thanks to the rapid real estate inflation that they can now tap into in their existing principal place of residence, and many of them are shopping for an investment property right here in Brisbane. Unfortunately, a lot of the time they're up against first-time buyers, and it's a very, very hot market right now, but there are some very good buys around, particularly in the unit market. So if you've missed the boat with house and land and you've missed the boat with townhouses, there's definitely some great properties that are still fairly well priced and of course have really good yields, and those are some of the units that we are now beginning to sell quite well. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to chat to me. My big concern, however, with investors, especially first-time investors, that they often don't ask the right questions. Rather than say, what are your property management fees? Now, you're not really going to get away without paying about 8 to 8.8 to up to 12%, because a good property manager deserves every single cent. They're looking after your investment, and you do not want to leave it in the hands of amateurs. Remember that a good property manager is not cheap either, and they get paid top banana for doing a job well. And that principal, in turn, can't be charging silly fees. Now, when you see a silly fee or a cheap fee, there's shortcuts being taken. There's a VA, a virtual assistant over in the Philippines, or there's a help desk, or there's entire teams of people in the Philippines. They're outsourcing their routine inspections. They're doing other things. They're employing underage trainees or trainees of any age that don't really quite know what they're doing, and they're learning the ropes. They're practicing on your investment property. Is that what you want? Cheap fees, cheap agents, and someone not even in the country doing the job? I'm sure it's not what you want. So really, when it comes to investing or when it comes to property management, you need to know that you're with someone that can give you advice. They can give you regular updates as to what's happening in the market, how the property's tracking, what you should also be getting as a rent in the current market. Why leave money on the table? Why? Why do that? If a property manager's under the pump, they're not going to say to you, you know what, we should probably go for another 20 or 30 bucks a week, or maybe $40 a week. They're going to turn around and go, nah, she'll be right. Let's just keep that tenant in there. I've got enough dramas as it is. I don't have the capacity or the time to be able to handle more stress. And they'll go the easiest route. And there's so many properties right now in Brisbane that are under yield. In other words, they're actually returning a lot less than they should, simply because the property manager doesn't want to put up the rent. Now, if you're happy to let your tenants stay there with a cheap rent, that's your call, that's your choice. You're a very nice, generous person. But there are some people that are actually topping in when they shouldn't be topping in, okay? That is what a good property manager does. Now, a good property manager will also have a look once a tenant is about to leave. They'll do a full audit, especially if a tenant's leaving, and they'll work out what they can do to increase the yield and how they can actually make some improvements on the property. Is there a small reno that needs doing? Do we need carpets? Do we need paint? Do we need new blinds? These are all the things that a property manager actually should do, but seldom does, because a lot of people don't realize that this is one of the services a good property manager does offer. And they may charge you a project management fee, but if you're interstate, isn't it worth paying that fee to have someone oversee your reno, especially if you can't come up to do it? So that's what a great property manager does. You shouldn't have your property that you're purchasing or purchased for $650,000 suddenly worth $550,000 10 years later, because it's so shabby and depressing that that's all it's worth. And unfortunately, we have seen that when we've gone to manage properties, or particularly when I've gone in to sell properties. They've needed carpet, they've needed paint, and they've got a B-grade tenant when they could have had an A-grade tenant, and they could have been having a good yield just by doing some basic maintenance along the years. So a better question is, who's in your team? What experience do they have? What do you know about the current legislation? What can you do to help me increase my yield? Can you give me regular updates? Or what other services do you offer? And perhaps a really good one is talking to existing landlords, offering some names and saying, are you able to give me a couple of your landlords to see whether I can do a reference check? That would be far better than asking, what are your fees? How cheap can you be? Cheap is not good, especially not when it comes to cars, shoes, or property managers.